seconds, no fouls to give. Halliburton looking. Halliburton driving, pulls up, jump shot. It's good! It's good! With 0.3 of a second remaining. Timeout, OKC. Tyrese Halliburton does it again.
I mean, last night was one of the strangest games I can remember watching, and at the same time, it was thrilling. Thrilling. You're missing out if you're not watching the NBA playoffs. And game one of the NBA Finals was memorable. It was not memorable if you had Oklahoma City laying 9.5, like I did last night. Good morning, everybody. We will get to game one last night in Oklahoma City in an incredible game in which the Thunder led for exactly 0.3 of a second for the entire game. But the 0.3 of a second that mattered the most. But before we get to last night's game in detail, man, some of you are worked up over this Terry McLaurin situation. You know, we had the report yesterday from Jordan Schultz that Terry is frustrated with the lack of a contract extension at this point. I guess there were others that kind of reported it as well. Some of you have told me that I don't have all of the other outlets that have reported some level of, consternation over this from Terry's side. I'll just tell you what Ben said yesterday, and I totally agree with him. Tommy said it as well on my podcast. This is an agent, more likely than not, just trying to give Terry, a little bit of leverage, get the fans all worked up, and it's working. This from Gary, 01. This is Gary 01 writing, Kevin, if they let Terry leave, this will be the worst look the franchise has had under Josh Harris. Hey, Gary, Terry can't leave. He's under contract. Just so I saw a lot of those come in, like if they let him leave, he can't go anywhere. He could hold out, sure. Doesn't really seem like a Terry move, but he could do that, but he's under contract for the upcoming season. He's not leaving to go anywhere. This from Rob. Sheehan, if they don't extend Terry, watch all of the fan goodwill evaporate in seconds. Really? 14-5? An NFC championship game appearance for the first time in 33 seasons, the most successful season in 3+ decades, and all of the fan goodwill will evaporate if they don't get Terry extended? Really? Wouldn't with me. And then this from Steven, a slightly different take. Steven writes, Scary Terry is a really good receiver, but not worth $30 million a year heading into his 30s. Honestly, the only regret they should have if they don't get him signed to a contract extension is that they should have been aggressive in free agency and gone out and got Devontae Adams. Thank you. And so many more of you that are really worked up over the Terry situation. Look, it's June 5th, June 6th. I get it. Okay. What else are we going to be worked up over? They didn't just play a game and blow a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter like Oklahoma City did last night. But I'll just say what I said yesterday. This will happen. And we don't need to get all worked up on June 5th, June 6th. Okay, we are still, 7 weeks away from the beginning of training camp. He missed He missed mandatory minicamp in 2022. He did not show up. He got fined. And then they got the deal worked out on June 28th. We're still 22 days before the last time he was extended. And by the way, the last time he was extended, there was a lot of true urgency to get it done because he was basically the best thing we had. So I can't imagine that Terry McLaurin is not going to be on the roster opening day under a new contract. But there is a chance he could be on the opening day roster with 1 year left on his deal. That's possible if they don't work anything out. Terry's not going to hold out. He does have a lot of leverage. Sure. You know why he's got a lot of leverage? Because they drafted Jaden Daniels last year. You may have heard of him. And they won 14 games, and they're going to try to win the Super Bowl this year. This is not a team coming off 8-9 or 9-8 just hoping for a winning season and some improvement and some gains. No, they're all in, and they think they have a chance. And by the way, they do. And Terry is integral to that effort to try to win the Super Bowl next year. So he does have some leverage. He's not dealing with a team that, isn't a contender. We're talking about our team being a contender now, a legitimate contender to win the whole thing. But they need him. They do. They need 5 much more than they need 17, but they need 17. They absolutely do. I think it's an interesting conversation, and we talked about this yesterday, because in most cases, when you've got a guy like Terry, who is clearly a very good receiver, he's not in the Jefferson Chase class. He just isn't. I know some of you want to put him there. Some of you, want to make sure that that he is described as like an elite wide receiver. He's not. He's excellent, though. I wouldn't have him in tier 3 as Pro Football Focus did. I'd have him in a large group of kind of 6, 7, 8 tier 2 receivers that you could probably mix and match and put in any order on any given day that you feel, strongly one way or the other about them. I think that combined with the fact that he's not Chase and he's not Jefferson and he's not CeeDee Lamb at 26 years old or AJ Brown at a younger age, I think that makes it an interesting dilemma. I don't even want to say it's a dilemma because I don't view it to be a dilemma for the team, but I think in most cases teams would be, discerning. They would make sure that they felt like you're not paying for past performance. Okay, this is not what this business is about. This is every year is a new year. You're trying to figure it out. You're not paying for what Terry did last year. You're paying him for what he will do in the future. If you're in, I would imagine years as much as dollars are a part of these conversations. Like, how comfortable are they giving him maybe 4 years tacked on to the one that he's got left? I don't know. I mean, I would imagine that that's a big part of the conversation. But it's, it makes it a little bit trickier when a guy is heading into his 30 and older years and probably wants top 3 to 5 money. That's probably where they are right now. They're like, look, even if we viewed you as top 3 to top 5, you're not 26, you're 30. You're going to be 30. And so heading into this season. So there's got to be a little bit of give there because we can't be strapped with a massive cap hit when you're 33 years old and not the same player. This will get worked out, people. I'd be shocked if it didn't. I don't know anything, okay? I'm not telling you that I know anything. I'm just telling you that he's such a good player. He's so important to what they're trying to accomplish now and in 2026, 2027. He is the perfect locker room culture leader. I don't think Terry McLaurin's the face of the franchise. There's now one face of the franchise. Okay, and that is their quarterback. Jaden Daniels has become the face of the franchise. If there isn't, a face of a franchise. I mean, even the greatest teams of all time. I mean, Brady and Belichick were faces of franchise. I guess Mahomes and Reed are 2 faces of the Kansas City Chiefs. Right now, most people know the Washington Commanders, painful to say, because of Jaden Daniels, not Terry McLaurin. But God, he's so good, and he's such a good person and a good part of a winning formula. It'll get done. We don't need to start talking about worst look and watch all the fan goodwill evaporate in seconds. First of all, that's not true, Rob. There's no way all of this fan goodwill would evaporate in seconds if they didn't extend Terry McLaurin before the final season remaining on his contract. And Gary 01, he can't leave. He's under contract. They could trade him. He could hold out, but he can't leave. It's not like he can go sign with another team. Doesn't work that way. But no, fan goodwill evaporating in seconds. Come on, man. We just had the most incredible 4.5 months following this football team and rooting for this football team that we've had in 33 years if you're, 33 or older, and the first time and the best time you've ever had for many of you in following this team. No, it would not fall apart if they didn't extend Terry, and they will. I bet big money that they will. I bet big money last night, Max, on Oklahoma City.
Oh no!
-9.5. Actually, to be honest with you, I bought the hook and had it at -9. I felt so good about it too, and watching the first half, I felt great about it.
Feel real good, huh?
Yeah, and by the way, they're 11.5-point favorites in game 2.
Ooh.
Now, you get that occasionally, in a series where the road team comes in, steals game 1. There's this sense that maybe that team feels satisfied with getting the split, and in game 2, they'll get run. I still think a 2-point difference tells you a lot about what the books think about what they watched last night. And even though this has been a trend for Indiana, they view it as flukish and not repeatable. Of course, Indiana's been repeating it for the entirety of this offseason. A couple of numbers from last night, if you're not familiar with what happened. First of all, they were down 15 in the fourth quarter. They were down 9 with 3 minutes to go. Teams in the NBA Finals entering game 1 last night, down by 9 or more points in the final 3 minutes of the NBA Finals since 1971, were 0 and 182. 0 and 182. The Pacers now in this postseason have essentially cheated death 4 times. All right. They were down 7 with 37 seconds to go against the Bucks and won. They were down 7 with 54 seconds to go against the Cavaliers and won. They were down 14 in Madison Square Garden in game 1 with just around 3 minutes to go and won. And then last night, they were down 9 with 3 minutes to go, down 15 earlier in the quarter, and came back and won. I'm not a big fan of the win probability in-game stuff. It's just, whatever. I don't follow it. I'm watching the game. I have a sense of what the win probability is. I don't need it, mathematically spelled out for me. But they have, in 4 different games in this postseason, cheated death. They were done. Now, we've talked about this throughout the NBA playoffs. It is strange, but it's explainable that the NBA is much different than it was, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, what currently is, a 20-point lead was a 10-point lead. Today's 20-point lead was yesterday's 10-point lead. It is not it's not something you can't overcome. It gets overcome all the time. Regular season, postseason. The reasons for it, multi. One, the 3-point shot, the length of the 3-point shot, and the increased, effectiveness and high percentages of made 3-pointers. 2, you can't stop anybody in the NBA. It's almost impossible to stop somebody. You saw one of the greatest defensive halves in NBA playoff history last night, but the Pacers still ended up scoring 111 points in the game. You just can't stop people and just completely shut them down. Last night, what Oklahoma City did in the first half, if they had played a team 20 years ago, the way they played Indiana in the first half, that team would have scored 50 points in the game. Seriously, it would have been in the 50s. And then thirdly, you just have the extension of these games with so many opportunities to rest, so many timeouts, so many reviews, which just gives teams more of an opportunity to come back without being, exhausted, physically exhausted and spent like perhaps they used to. Last night, Indiana became the first team to have 19 turnovers before halftime and win. It was the most turnovers before halftime since 2000 in an NBA playoff game. So we'll take a break. When we come back, I want to get into some of last night's game. If you want to weigh in, we'll open up phone lines 301-230-0980. Your thoughts on last night's amazing comeback again by the Pacers in the postseason. Anything you want to say in recapping game one, we'll open up phone lines 301-230-0980. But when we come back, before we get to your calls, I'll give you my recap of what happened and talk about what needs to happen for Oklahoma City to get this series back on track in game two. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app.
자, 언더독인 인디애나가 익숙한 상황을 맞이한다. 할리버튼 버텨내는 인디애나. 와우! 0.3초.
That was the Korean call of last night's finish. Tyrese Halliburton over not Lou Dort because Rick Carlisle is a hell of a coach, and you don't call a timeout and allow Oklahoma City to set their defense. They did not call a timeout after they got the stop that they needed, and they let Halliburton work against Cason Wallace, who was also a good defender, but he's not Lou Dort. We'll try to get as many international calls of the final last night as we can. Max is hard at work on that. Phone lines are open, 301-230-0980. If you want to weigh in on the NBA Finals, we will. You know, many of you said, can we just start talking about Terry? We'll take calls on Terry today. I promise you, we will take calls on Terry today. But we're not doing that to start the show. If you have a reaction to what you watched last night, 301-230-0980. If you didn't watch last night, I'm not going to lecture. I'm just telling you, if you're a sports fan and you like basketball, you're missing out if you have some sort of preconceived notion of what the NBA is, because it is a completely different product in the postseason, and it's awesome. Real quickly, I will digress for 1 second on a Terry topic. Neil in Rockville. Terry should be paying them to be able to play with Jaden. Of course, he's exaggerating, but certainly Jaden Daniels set Terry up for a really, really nice payday. He earned it, though. He was awesome. Okay, both things can be true. All right, before we get to phones on this, I said that it's one of the strangest games I've seen in a long time because there was never a moment for me in watching this game that I didn't think that Oklahoma City was going to win and cover. They were favored by 9.5. I bought the hook. I had them laying 9. I was never worried. I was a little bit annoyed that they had not done what they had done to other teams when they had played defense that way and, you know, lengthened the lead to 25 or 30, because that's really what it should have been based on what they were doing defensively in the first half. They should have been up by 25 at halftime, 30 in the third quarter, instead of just hovering somewhere between 10 and 15 the entire time. But there was never a moment, if you watch this game, that you thought that Oklahoma City would lose the game. My God, I didn't think there was a way they wouldn't cover the game. Because the other thing that was happening during the course of the game is that you could see Indiana was kind of starting to get physically overwhelmed and tired. But wrong. I was dead wrong. And certainly I am aware, which is why I said Indiana is a much better matchup in these finals for Oklahoma City than the Knicks are. And I predicted 5, but I said they could win 2. I predicted OKC in 5, still alive. But I said, you know, if Indiana won 2, it wouldn't shock me. But if they won the series, it would shock me. And the reason Indiana can, you know, compete here is they can really score, man. And when they go small with Siakam at the 5, everybody on the floor can shoot it. Everybody on the floor, no matter who's out there, actually can shoot it for them. I mean, Thomas Bryant, the old wizard, who, by the way, looks like he's 3 inches shorter and 35 pounds slimmer. He's got a great stroke. He's knocked down some big shots for them in their last 2 games. I mean, Toppin was huge with big threes. Neesmith, Nembhard. God, Nembhard played so well for them down the stretch. Obviously, Halliburton, Siakam is big. But I'll start with this. The first half of that game was I want to be careful because I don't want to just live in the most recent thing that I saw. But it is up there with the most hellacious defensive performances by a team in the first 24 minutes of an NBA game that I've ever seen, or that I've seen in a long time. And the context for this, people, is that it's really hard. If you watch NBA basketball, it is really hard to shut teams down there's the skill level is just so outrageous offensively. You just can't stop teams from scoring. Indiana's a talented offensive team. They were averaging 117 points a game in these playoffs. You're not going to, a great defensive performance might hold them to 95, 100, 105, not 77. That's not possible. But what you saw in the first half, a record number of turnovers for a team in the first half, 19. I was watching some of the early morning programming and some of the late night stuff. I talked to Scott this morning. He hosted the post game with Legs, and then they had a bunch of people coming in. He did a great interview, by the way, with Tyrese Halliburton after the game. Did you see it?
Yes, and I have some audio from it talking about what was on the card.
We'll play it in a bit. But there are various people that would come on and say things like, all Indiana had to do was just stop turning the ball over. They weren't turning the ball over like carelessly. The ball was being taken from them consistently. Oklahoma City in the first half had 11 steals. 11 steals in a half. The other 8 turnovers were all forced. There were another 4 to 5 to 6 near steals. The deflections that they get, the long-armed knocking the ball, getting in passing lanes, the physical man-to-man on-ball defending. If you love basketball at any level, to watch Oklahoma City play defense, it is just, it's bliss to watch them defend. They switch consistently because every player on the floor, 1 through 9, 1 through 10, can guard any position. I mean, their best defender, I think Lou Dort's their best defender, but if he's not, Alex Caruso is, he comes off the bench. They had 11 steals. Indiana couldn't just stop turning the ball over. It's not like they were choosing to turn it over. Were they a little jittery? Sure. Oklahoma City should have been a little jittery as well. It's not like they had a lot of, NBA Finals experience. And it's game one for a lot of players that have never been on this stage, in this particular moment. Oklahoma City took the ball from them every single time down court. It was like, oh my God, there's another steal. I think some of the turnovers were just called turnovers and not steals, but they were close to steals. I mean, the deflections, the balls getting knocked out of hands, the stepping into passing lanes, the block shots, it was dominant. Indiana still scored 45 points on 18 less possessions in the first half, and they were only down 12. And they should have been down 25 to 30. Oklahoma City's done this consistently where they have just taken the ball away from the other team and said, no, you're not getting a shot off. You're going to be so rattled if we don't steal it from you, you're going to turn it over. And then they're up 30 and 40. They've been up 50 a couple of times in this postseason. But they weren't. They were up 12. And the reason they were only up 12 is they didn't take advantage of the steals and the turnovers. They only had 9 points at halftime off of 19 turnovers, of which 11 were steals. Some of the steals were at the rim. They weren't necessarily out, on the perimeter, where typically a steal will end up in a dunk or a layup. They didn't take advantage of them. Why? They missed a lot of easy shots. They missed a lot of shots at the rim. They missed a lot of open threes. But I think personally, there was discussion, and I thought it was a good point by Richard Jefferson early, that Indiana just needed to take a deep breath and just kind of slow down. They play fast, but they were playing too fast. I think it was more, and I'm convinced of it, it was much more just Oklahoma City was just taking, their lunch money on most possessions. I thought Oklahoma City needed to slow down offensively. I thought they took too many quick shots, too many 1 to 2 players touching the ball shots. They could have, off of all of those extra possessions and all of, out of the 19 turnovers, and by the way, they also had like 4 block shots in the first half, something like that. They could have made Indiana work more defensively. They could have shortened the game a little bit more. And I think it's one of those things moving forward. Oklahoma City is going to play great defense, and Indiana is going to make some shots. But Oklahoma City can't waste the great defense by giving the ball back quickly on the other end. Make them work after they've turned it over or after you've picked them clean. Make them work defensively. Shorten the game. They have a lot of guys that can score. Siakam, Nesmith, Turner, Nembhard, Halliburton, Toppin, Mathurin. Who am I missing? What's his face can shoot it off the bench. Shepard he's got great range. McConnell is such a great playmaker. I mean, last night they ended up with 6 players in double figures. This was a team effort in their comeback. But I think in many ways, Indiana wants to play fast. Oklahoma City is going to lock them down. They're going to be more steals and more turnovers. That's just the way they play. You just can't get what you want more often than not. So don't give them 82 shot attempts in a game in which they ultimately ended up with 24 total turnovers. Because make that 77 total. It takes 6 possessions away, and it's ball game. I thought Oklahoma City played too fast at times. They got comfortable with this team is, they can't score against us. We can rip it from them anytime we want, but they didn't take advantage of it. 9 points on 19 turnovers, 11 of which were steals, is not good. That needed to be, think about that, right? 19, the possibility was 57 points if they all ended up in threes, but somewhere between 38 and 57 points. But at 50%, you're talking about somewhere between 19 and 28.5 points. And off of turnovers, you're usually going to shoot a higher percentage because typically it results in a run out and a break opportunity. A lot of the steals were in the paint near the rim on drives, but a lot of them were on the perimeter. 9 points they ended up with. They basically made 4 shots. That should have been another 15 points, game over. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I didn't think he played well last night. That may be a total contrarian view. He had 38 points on 14 to 30 shooting. So, he was near 50%. He was 3 for 6 from behind the arc, 7 of 8 from the free throw line. He had 3 steals, by the way, defensively. He only turned it over twice. I didn't think it was – I've watched every single SGA game in this postseason, and I didn't think that was a great game from him. I thought, first of all, he had a chance to close the game at the end, and he didn't, and that is the shot that you want there at the end. He got to his spot and hit, in that mid-range, had that fade away, and he was just a little strong with it. The possession before that was a hell of a block by Siakam. I think he had a pass that he could have made on that. He also made some big shots down the stretch, but I thought it was a C game. 38 points, just 2 turnovers, shooting 14 to 30. He was super aggressive in the first half, but I didn't think he was great. I thought he was okay. I didn't think Jalen Williams was good enough last night. He missed so many shots and a lot of shots at the rim. Holmgren's got to end up with more than 6. He missed several shots at point-blank range. What was he for the game? 2 of 9. I would bet you 3 of those were point-blank. You should have been easy buckets. I thought Dort was amazing. I thought Hartenstein played really well. I thought Caruso was solid. But he missed some open threes, which he's been knocking down. Now, as far as Indiana goes, Halliburton was incredible, man, at the end. He was, and he's been that. He is super big-time clutch. And he was not great during the game. He was, look, the numbers won't say that this was his best game, and it wasn't his best game. But the truth is, the only way Indiana is going to do another 3 times what they did last night is the way they did it last night, which is have 6 guys end up in double figures. That was a team effort. Halliburton had 14 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists. He had 3 turnovers. He got picked once cleanly on a drive. He didn't, take that many shots. He was 6 of 13. But, man, when it mattered, like it's been with him throughout this postseason, God, he was good. That shot at the end, they had total trust in him, and why wouldn't they? He does a really good job of creating space even on great defenders. Now, I'm sure OKC would have preferred Lou Dort to have been the man covering Halliburton on that final play. And there was, some screen action and some switch, but Dort was out of that play, and it ended up being Cason Wallace, number 22, who guarded him. Dort is arguably, a top 5 defender in the league. Did he make the first team All-NBA defensive team? Look that up and tell me who was on that team. And tell me where Caruso was. They're ridiculous defensively. But I think moving forward, you saw Oklahoma City. They're not going to all of a sudden not defend. They're the best defensive team we've seen since maybe the Pistons, the bad boy Pistons, in the postseason. The results, the quantifiable results back that up. But I think they have to themselves slow down a little bit after they get these possessions. Maybe shorten the game a little bit. Indiana, you're not going to stop from scoring completely. They're just too good. I still like Oklahoma City to win the series. My prediction of 5, no, I think Indiana will certainly get another one. And I think that the next one they get could be like a 135, 131 shootout kind of a game. I'm expecting one of those in this series. But I still think Oklahoma City is the better team. Minus 325, they're still a sizable favorite to win this series. All right, 301-230. What else did I have on my notes? Toppin, Nembhard. Nembhard was really, in many ways, the unsung hero for Indiana. He did such a great job handling the basketball because there was so much emphasis on Halliburton, and then he made some big shots. Man, this is what they do, man. It doesn't matter what the score is. They can end up making shots, and I'm talking about threes in waves. They were 18 of 39 from behind the arc. They shot 46.2% against the best defensive team in the postseason. The issue, of course, is you're going to have to make some defended shots, which they did. I mean, Turner banked one in from 3. And you're going to have to hope that when they rip it from you, they don't score at the rate that they had been coming into last night's game. Because if they turn turnovers into points at the rate that they had been before last night, that's a 20-point loss for Indiana. That was the key to the game. To me, ultimately, OKC did not turn their defense into enough offense. All right, 301-230-0980. I see you on hold. Sabah's on hold. We haven't talked to Sabah in a while. Ross, Nick, Rudy, anybody else that wants to weigh in, we've got an open line at 301-230-0980. NBA Finals Game 1 reaction. We will get to Terry. We'll get to that. We'll talk some Aaron Rodgers today. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app.
All right, Aaron Rodgers finally signs a 1-year deal with the Steelers just a week ahead of minicamp. Tyrese Halliburton hit the game winner last night as the Pacers beat the Thunder by a score of 111-110. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 38 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. And Halliburton with the game winner, like I said, 14 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists. The Nats, they fall by a score of 7-1 to the Chicago Cubs. Jake Irvin gives up 8 hits, 3 earned runs on 5 innings pitched. The Nats will get going tonight against the Texas Rangers at 6:45. Pregame will be at 6:15 with Charlie and Dave on the call. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980 and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
The other night on the show, I put my hand up and I said, look, I was late to the party on it.
Yeah, you're a real one for that.
Well,
I heard that. You're a real one for that.
Well,
a lot of your counterparts won't admit that now.
Well,
so
okay, now I'm going to give myself a little wiggle room here and say you guys are under 500 at Christmas. Am I right?
Yo, we were rough.
Okay,
we were rough.
So were you bad at the start?
We were.
So all I said is I was a little late to the party,
For
but
sure,
I put my hand up.
We were late to the party too.
Okay, well, and I'm going to be. I'll be a real one right now. Every single note I had on this card, getting ready for this show, is about Oklahoma City winning this game, and I'm sitting here with you. It's an amazing show that you all are putting on, and the belief is amazing to watch as well. I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much, Tyrese Halliburton.
Scott last night with Halliburton on his show down in Oklahoma City following the game. 301-230-0980 if you want to weigh in on the NBA Finals. I've given you my thoughts. Look, I never thought for a moment, even though I've watched throughout, I know what Indiana's capable of. I just thought that Oklahoma City was, for certainly the first 38 minutes, 42 minutes, the much better team. It was not reflected on the scoreboard. I admit that. They should have been up 30. And in every other game, the way they played in the first 24 to 36 minutes, they have been up by 25 or 30. Last night, they just couldn't make their defense turn into enough offense. I think that was the key to the game more than anything else. Sabah, first in today. It's been a while. Go ahead. I know you love hoops.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Boy, you caught me on my break. I appreciate you. Hey, so glad you're doing well. So that was number one. Get that out of the way. I do consider you a friend, even though we've never personally met. So I appreciate that out there. Yes, sir. And I tell you, this basketball, I'm tired of everybody, including you, Kevin, you underdoing Halliburton. Halliburton is the best player on Indiana's team. He doesn't need to take the most shots like SGA, shoot all the time, or the Brunson, shoot all the time. It's funny, they score 40 all the time, and they don't ever win anything. So I'm not bought in on OKC. I'm all about Indiana, and when it matters most, Halliburton comes through. I cannot believe he didn't get the MVP in the Eastern Conference Finals. He reminds me of what they were doing to Steph Curry when he was winning the championship just because Kevin Durant showed up. I'm sorry, but Halliburton is the real deal, and he is a star, and I'm not that sold on SGA. And the biggest irony of ironies is that SGA had a chance to do what he does best, mid-range jumper, to seal the deal at the end of the game, missed it. But yet Halliburton, who does a bunch of threes and stuff, he actually beat SGA at his own game, hitting that pull-up too. I love that. So I'm all excited. I'm all in on this NBA Finals. But I really wanted to give a shout-out to Halliburton.
You know, by the way, I forgot about that. Yeah. I was shocked that Halliburton was not the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Siakam was. I was completely floored by that. I thought that they got it wrong on that. With that said, look, he is their best player. It's close, though, in my opinion, with Siakam. It's not that I don't like Halliburton, Sabah. I do like Halliburton. I like Halliburton a lot. I clearly love his clutch gene. I just don't consider him to be in that upper echelon of true, NBA stars. But you know what? This time next year, I might feel differently, especially if he hits another game winner and they walk off with the Larry O'Brien trophy. He was phenomenal when it mattered the most last night. And I thought his decision-making for much of the night, to your point, was outstanding. Thanks for the call. It's good to hear from you. Let's go to Ross in Tampa. Ross, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, man, I don't know if you heard. I don't know if anybody's told you, but in 49 other states, it's just basketball. Kevin, what's good in the hood?
What's up, Ross?
Hey, that was some of the most suffocating defense I've ever seen an NBA team play in my life. That was prison defense. And it was like, I was kind of resigned to dropping game one. We're going to regroup. But I'm telling you right now, Kevin, they better hope that it's split going back to Indy. That city is ferocious. You go back up 2-0, I'm calling it right now, Kevin. It's going to be a gentleman's sweep. I think we'll get them out of there in 5. If they lose on Sunday, it's a wrap. This team is too damn good to drop a lead like that against a team as ferocious as OKC, and I mean that. That's all I got on that. People were – I don't want to talk about Terry. I'm not here to call about Terry, but he's just too busy celebrating his hometown team doing what nobody thinks
he's from Indianapolis, sure.
That's whooped my ass in high school football, too. I didn't really appreciate that. But, Kevin, I got two questions for you before I get up off of here. If you're an OKC fan, you're not claiming a championship back in 1979 when they weren't even in the state.
No,
they
were
in,
the
right?
Seattle Supersonics. Yes.
Yeah, that'd be like the Baltimore Ravens talking about 1964 championship when they were the Browns. It's weird.
Right.
And then, and also what you just said to Sabah, and I don't really agree with her all that often, but I agree with her with that call. If the Pacers do close it out, are they another 2004 Pistons to you? Or would you kind of say
that's a good question. I mean, look, you have to take the entirety of the season, and Halliburton was not a top 5 player throughout the season. He has been an arguable top 5 player in the postseason, but it wouldn't fit the description that I've stuck with all of these years, which is you can't win a title unless you have a debatable top 5 player in the league, and Halliburton is not a top 5 player in the league, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think right now, unless he just absolutely dominates and takes over and hits 2 more game-winning shots and they win 4-1 in a gentleman's sweep, as you just suggested. But I think even then, I can't change the way I felt about him heading into the finals. I think he's a really good player. What was he? Was he all NBA third team? I think he was, right?
Team.
Yeah,
Criminally,
third team.
Yeah.
By that definition, he's not top 5. I think by the eye test, you're watching him throughout the course of the year, he's not top 5. So, yeah, the Indiana would break that 20, at this point now, that 20-year run of having to have a top 5 player to win the title. I don't think they're going to win it, though, Ross. I don't. I still think Oklahoma City wins this series. Thanks for the call.
If they lose Sunday, it's over, Kevin. If they lose Sunday, it's over.
They're not losing Sunday night. They're not losing Sunday night.
We'll see, man.
Thanks, Ross.
All right,
appreciate it. Let's go to Nick in Fairfax. Nick, go ahead.
What's up, Kevin? I was just calling because, that game was insane. 19 turnovers in the first half, and you're only down 12 at halftime. Come on, this got to be a larger deficit. And then you 8 minutes left in the fourth, and you're just here come the Pacer probability charts. I think it was Naismith hit the 3 with 2 minutes, 40 seconds left in the game, and that was in Caruso's face. You're there's no way they're going to do it again. Halliburton does the magic, and now all of a sudden I'm sitting here and I'm Coach Tibbs, he just got fired. Poor guy. It just happened to OKC too. So crazy game, crazy ending. Just wanted to give my take.
Yeah, it was such a crazy game. It was unthinkable to me that this would happen. It's hard to say that if you've been watching the NBA playoffs, that any sort of comeback or any sort of massive turnaround within a game is unthinkable because it happens so often. But last night, man, it just felt like Indiana was on lockdown. Again, though, like I said, I did understand at halftime, if you've watched OKC, the lead's typically 25-30, not 12. They weren't turning their defense into enough offense. That's why they lost. Because when you turn somebody over 19 times, and again, they turn them over. These were 11 steals and another 8 forced turnovers. And by the way, another 4 to 5 that were near, that ran the shot clock down, that ended in a bad shot attempt. You don't even count that stuff because of what their defense created. And they didn't turn it into enough offense. That was the bottom line. They had 57 at half. It should have been 75-45 at halftime. And instead, it was 57-45. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Rudy in Glen Burnie, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Good morning. Look, I think in that first half, that they, knew that Indiana wanted to get out fast. They wanted to get the ball out fast every time they get the rebound. They were coming from behind them, tipping the ball, stealing the ball from them. And that's when the majority of those turnovers happen. Second half, they changed it up. They're watching their backside, and in the last quarter, the last 4 possessions, Indiana turned up their defense. They didn't.
Yes, good point, Rudy. Good point.
Yeah, they couldn't score on those last 4 possessions. They couldn't score. Indiana turned up.
Well, SGA got 1 bucket there.
It out harder. Yeah, they pushed it out harder, and that's how they got to get that game. So I think it's going to be a better series than you think, because Indiana does have Nembhard. They have 23 that are play defense on
Neesmith.
the Oklahoma City the star. So I think it's going to be a better series than you think. It may go 7 games before it's over with.
Look, I didn't think so before last night, and you made a really good point that I did not mention. Indiana defensively was outstanding as well in this game. But if you think about the first half, though, with all of the opportunities off turnovers, Oklahoma City did miss a lot of point-blank shots and a lot of wide-open threes with some of their shooters, whether it was, Jalen Williams, who was 1 for 4, or even a guy like Cason Wallace, who was 0 for 3. Caruso missed wide-open corner looks, which are perfect from him. They had some of those, but they didn't knock them down. They've got to turn their defense into offense. And yes, Indiana was better in protecting the ball in the second half. Why was that? In part because they went small. You had Siakam at the 5 for a lot of those minutes, and he can handle the ball. And everybody, when they look, almost any lineup they put on the floor, they can score with. But not every lineup is the best. It was hard for, the other thing we didn't mention is Oklahoma City went with a new lineup to start the game. They went with Wallace instead of Hartenstein, which I thought was really interesting. They were reacting to Indiana before they had even played a game. But again, no chance did I think in watching that first half could Indiana win this game. The only thing that was, gnawing at me was I've watched OKC enough in this postseason. Usually when they are absolutely ripping it from people left and right, they're up 30. They're not up 12. And that's what they didn't do a good job of. Thanks so much for the call, Rudy. Really appreciate it. Let's talk some Terry McLaurin next. From Gray, I agree with your earlier emails. If they don't sign Terry, this is a horrible look for a franchise that has established a lot of new goodwill. That's a follow-up to what we got earlier and what I read earlier. Gary01. Kevin, if they let Terry leave, this will be the worst look for the franchise under Josh Harris. From Rob Sheehan, if they don't extend Terry and watch all of the fan goodwill evaporate in seconds. Again, let me emphasize, Terry can't leave. He's under contract. Of course, he could hold out or they could decide to trade him. I think, honestly, big picture here on June 6th, deep breath. We got a long way to go. They don't go to camp for 7 weeks. Terry's last contract extension wasn't signed until June 28th. Terry missed the mandatory minicamp back in June of 2022. Terry is actually in a better position to miss the offseason work than he was back then, as Ben pointed out to us yesterday, because they had a new quarterback back then. It was Carson Wentz. Remember that season? He's played with Jaden. I'm not saying that all of the work doesn't help. But look, I know the time of year. We've, kind of done this together now for a long period of time. And there are no games to talk about. There's no draft to talk about. There's no free agency to talk about. And so right now, this is along with the OTA absences. By the way, to me, Lattimore specifically, because that one just is irritating. Him not showing up for any OTA days. Now, maybe he will. There are more. But at this point, it appears as if he won't show up for any of them. I think that's a bigger issue than this Terry issue. They traded a bunch of picks for Lattimore. They need Lattimore to be good. And he has painted the picture for everybody. Not that it has to be true or accurate, but that he is lacking in some self-awareness. 87 of 90 players on the roster have attended these 4 OTA days, and he's one of 3 that haven't. And by the way, Tunsil shouldn't get a free pass. He's new to this organization as well. I think most of you, I would hope most of you, if you're new to a company and there's a voluntary activity in which 87 out of the 90 employees are going to show up, most of whom have been with the company for a while, don't you think it'd be a good idea to show up at least once? Rearrange your schedule, get on a plane, show up. I'm not saying that he's not in shape. He's not working hard. He's not communicating. We heard Joe Witt talk about that. That's a bigger issue to me. And I know it's just an OTA thing, but in terms of concern level, I'm more concerned that Marshawn Lattimore's performance is not going to live up to the trade compensation in November of 2024 than I am that Terry isn't going to sign a contract extension, be in uniform, and play at a really high level. It's not even close. Now, if we get to training camp beginning and Terry isn't there, which may be a possibility, I still think a deal will get done, and it'll get done in time for training camp. Would I be, more concerned? More concerned, but still not hysterical. We see this happen in the league all the time. And I mentioned yesterday that older players, veteran players, on their 3rd deal, 4th deal, these tend to be the times in which things like this happen. I know the Ayuk thing got extended last year in San Francisco, and that was his first, big deal. And he's a much younger player, and Chase and Higgins, it's true. But the reason often it happens, for a longer period of time, and you get more reports of frustration with older players like Hendrickson and now with Terry, off the reports from yesterday, is that it's not the easiest of deals to do, because he is going to go into his age 30 season. He's an excellent player, but he's not Chase. He's not Jefferson. And, so it's not like a no-brainer to give him top 3 money, which I'm guessing he's asking for, certainly in that 30 million plus range, probably the 32, 33, hoping it lands at 30. And the team is saying, you're really good, but Ayuk got 28 last year and he's younger, or Tyreek Hill's 31 and he's just barely, he's not making, 33, 34. So it's not the easiest, fit, but I don't think it's square peg round hole either. I think they'll work it out. Like, I certainly think that this is going to get worked out. And I would bet money it happens before training camp begins, so that Terry enters year 2 and he enters without missing a day of training camp. He may miss mini camp, but I'm not concerned about that. It's Terry. He's built up the equity. He knows the offense. He's worked with his quarterback for a year. Here's where, the two sides, like if you were to say, well, who's got the leverage in this? Well, Terry does. Terry understands what the team is trying to accomplish this year in 2025. They're trying to win a Super Bowl. They are trying to win an NFC title. They're trying to first win 13, 14 games and win the NFC East, have a very high seed, if not the number 1 overall seed, and get to a Super Bowl. And Terry is a top 3 to 5 reason that they'll do it. And if you take away one of those top 3 to 5 reasons, well, you diminish your chances. This is not a team that went 7-10 and had a quarterback that kept growing and, we feel good about the quarterback, but we're still not sure. And so year 2 is going to be about the quarterback again. And by the way, that would still give Terry leverage, right? Because you'd want him, the quarterback, to have his best receiver. No, we're talking about a team that went 12-5, won 2 road playoff games, 60 minutes from a Super Bowl, that traded picks, 8 of them, for 3 different players. Marshawn Lattimore, Deebo Samuel, and Laramie Tunsil, to try to win today. Now, the good news is all of those moves also came with some long-term, no long-term give. They Tunsil's going to be a part of this thing for several years, and Lattimore hopefully will be. Deebo may only be here for a year. If he plays really well, I'm sure he'll want to hit the open market. But he's got some leverage here, and I'm sure he's trying to exert it, and I'm sure the team will eventually get to a number that makes sense. I think the good news too, look, this could be from the team standpoint, an advantage, and that is they're not working with someone who is unreasonable. They're not working with diva wide receiver guy. This guy is all about team. Terry, for those of you who don't know, makes $23.2 million a year. He'll turn 30 on September 15th, so right at the beginning of the season. The 23.2, which was off the extension in 2022, ranks 14th, I think it is, among wide receivers. So he's clearly underpaid. But to get into the top 3 in the league, that's a $34 million a year number. I would bet he's asking for it, and I would bet the team thinks he's probably closer to like DJ Moore at $28 million. T. Higgins, the $28.75 million. Brandon Ayuk's at $30 million. I bet they'll settle on something that pays Terry like $30 million a year and makes him a top 6, 7 paid player in the game, which, of course, today's overpayment, and I'm not suggesting that would be an overpayment, is tomorrow's bargain. It always works out that way in the NFL. And so they've got the space. I would imagine years are a part of this conversation as well because of his age, and because, they don't want to be paying Terry, let's just say in 28 and 29, 28 in particular, when they've got to get Jaden signed, or 27 in particular, let's say year 3, year 4, 27, 28, when Jaden is going to be a big number. There's some of that thinking as well. So they're going to have to figure out how to front load it more likely than back load it. But that's where you get into the years discussion. So I think it happens. My level of concern about Terry McLaurin being a part of this team under a contract extension is on a scale of 1 to 5, 0 to 5, 0 being not concerned at all, to 5 being super concerned. I'm at a 1. I'm at a 0.5, actually. That's where I am. I think it'll get done. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Your level of concern and anything else you'd like to add to the Terry McLaurin conversation. 0, you're not concerned at all. 5, you're very concerned. And you can weigh in like other emailers and people on Twitter have with your feelings about the organization. There seem to be some angry feelings towards the organization that they've made Terry frustrated. That happens in business, happens in contract conversation. Look, do I think there's a chance Terry could just play out his final year on his deal and become a free agent in 2026? I don't think that chance is very high at all, but I certainly think he's going to play for Washington in 2025. He doesn't have a choice. I mean, he's not going to sit out. I don't think he's going to sit out. All right, phone line's open for that. 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, Team 980, team980.com, theteam980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. Download us. You can listen to us wherever you go, whenever you want. And we are also on the Team 980 YouTube page. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button for us. Thanks. All right, 301-230-0980. Terry McLaurin concern level. If you're just sort of joining this conversation, there was a report yesterday that Terry is frustrated with the team and the contract extension negotiations. This was a report from Jordan Schultz at the Schultz Report. Quote, sources, Commanders All-Pro wide receiver Terry McLaurin has made it clear to the team that he's frustrated with the lack of progress on a long-term deal. Then he wrote, as I previously reported, McLaurin unexpectedly left voluntary workouts after initially attending, and it remains to be seen whether he'll report for mandatory minicamp. 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open. Your concern level, 0, no worries at all. He's going to sign a deal and be ready to roll for training camp. 5, you're extremely concerned and you're upset at the way this is going down right now, or somewhere in between. I'm like at a 0.5. Actually, I'm at a 0. Max, where are you?
I like you rounding down from 0.5 to 0.
Yeah, I'm at a 0.
When the tweet came out yesterday, I was a little bit more concerned. Like I was probably somewhere around a 2, but still confident that it would get done. And now having this information and sitting with it for a full 24 hours, getting a good night's sleep on it, I'm down to a 1, if not a 0.5. Because this really feels like agents just doing their job, leaking things to media, like you said at the top of the show. And that's kind of, the more I thought about it, that's really what national reporters like to do, is be a mouthpiece for these agents. And I can't blame the guy for doing his job. So yeah, I understand why Terry would be frustrated, especially with how long it's taking, but I'm not crazy concerned just yet.
What did Albert Breer say on Grant and Danny?
I'll pull it up.
A friend of mine just texted me and said, play what Albert Breer said on Grant and Danny.
I was looking at that earlier this morning before the show.
That sound, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, here, I got it right here for you. Let's take a listen together.
Right now, if you ask me, like where this is, and I think it's just sort of the, I hate to say normal course of things, but I do think to some degree these things do get bumpy, and I think they've gotten bumpier as the market's exploded over the last couple of years with the cap going up as fast as it has. And so, if you're Terry McLaurin, I think you look at it and you're saying, like, you don't even come to me with anything that doesn't start with a 3, you know what I mean, per year. And I think it's fair of him to ask for something in that range just based on where the market's gone. Obviously last year, Justin Jefferson gets 35 and CeeDee Lamb gets 34. But like I'd say the real comp is probably DK Metcalf, who he gets traded to Pittsburgh and he gets 33 per year on a 4-year deal. So, I think those comps are out there, and I think they will eventually get something done. Terry, and you guys know this, you don't need me to tell you, Terry's too important to what they've built there. But sometimes these things can get a little messy along the way, and that's sort of where we are right now.
Yeah. Oh, so that's interesting because DK Metcalf right now is 4th at $33 million a year. He's 27 years old. I'm not going to say that DK Metcalf is better than Terry McLaurin. I do think, and I think most of you know this about me, I think that there are tiers. PFF put tiers together. They had Terry in tier 3 heading into next year. I would have him in tier 2 with about 7 to 8 guys. I think that there is a top tier, and I think it's Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I think these are 2 true, uncheckable superstar wide receivers that can dominate games. Others would like to put a guy like A.J. Brown into that group. I think A.J. Brown's very much at the top or near the top of a tier 2 group, which I think would include, a DK Metcalf and an Amon-Ra St. Brown. And, I saw the PFF list had Nico Collins, I think, in there. He is certainly an emerging great receiver. Lamb, Nakua, Terry, still Tyreek Hill, I think. Jesus, how about Mike Evans last year? These are, Malik Neighbors is going to be in this group, and he's going to be climbing, I think, once he gets anybody that can get him the football. but $33 million would put him in the top 5. You know, I think something just north of $30 million a year. I think years are going to be very important. You know, Metcalf, because he's 27, got 4 years. You know, Tyreek Hill with his last deal got 3 years, you know, at $30 million. He's the oldest guy in front of Terry. Devontae Adams, you know, he's, you know, working on that deal from that pays him $22 million. So what was that? You know, last year before, forgetting now. Terry deserves certainly more than Brandon Ayuk. I think T. Higgins, he deserves more. I think he's right there with Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's where he is. He's right there with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Different age, different, you know, futures, but I think the same kind of impact on games. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Concern level over the Terry McLaurin frustration over how contract extension talks are going. 0, no worries at all. You think there's no chance he's not going to be in a uniform on opening day of training camp. 5, you're very concerned that, you know, he may end up playing on a 1-year deal. Because really, that's the worst case. I guess the worst case could be holdout, and he, you know, holds out for the season. That ain't happening. Terry McLaurin's not holding out for the season. Okay, the worst case here is that Terry ends up playing 2025 on a 1-year deal on the last year of his contract. That is the worst case. 0 to 5, 0, no worries. 5, worst case, they don't get a deal done with him and he plays out his contract and becomes a free agent in 2026. Where are you guys? 301-230-0980. I'm at a 0. No worries at all about this thing. Not on June 6th. Start with Joe. Joe, go ahead. Joe, you there?
Hey, Kevin, I got you.
Hey,
yeah, I'm
Joe.
here, right here. I got you.
Yep.
Hey, sorry about that.
No worries.
You know, like you, man, I'm at a 0. Great. This is crazy. I mean, this is the beginning of June, like you said, you know, and if this was a couple of years ago after, you know, 3 years ago when he did the extension, and then remember in 2023, there were, I mean, he didn't show it, but there were signs he definitely wanted out because he was fed up with the Eric Bieniemy system. That's way in the past, Kevin. We finally have a quarterback that throws the football. They love the relationship, and we're playing for right now. I mean, we were literally 60 minutes away from going to a Super Bowl, and the fact that the fans are like not concerned about this, no, this is a 0. And Terry knows that. I mean, I can guarantee that in a training game, he'll be there. I mean, if it's at mandatory minicamp, knows it next week, yeah, he'll be there too. I mean, this is different. If this was 2 or 3 years ago, we have a whole new conversation. We finally have a winning formula. We got adults in the room. You know, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Josh Harris are all making sure to win right now because they know that they want to get all these extensions now while Jaden Daniels is still in that rookie contract because they know what we have in front of us. So this is definitely a 0. I mean, the fact that fans are saying this is all over right now, you got to be kidding me. Are they lifelong fans or not by saying that? So, no, this is a 0.
Well,
move on from this.
I don't want to even get into it. I've gotten into it before, but the fan base, you know, now, especially on social media, compared to what it was 20 years ago. Yeah, you're 100% right. This is a no-brainer on June 6th. It's just not a big deal on June 6th. Can't get worked up about it. You know, I had a friend of mine text me. He said, man, you are down on Terry McLaurin. No, I'm not. I'm just calling it the way I see it. I think he's somewhere around 10. I think there are 9 guys I would take in front of him right now. And when you factor in age, maybe 11 or 12. Terry finished 19th in the league last year in receptions, 15th in yards. I mean, he's not an elite receiver, people. He's not. Have you watched Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase? He's not in that league. Nobody is. I mean, I guess you could make a small case for A.J. Brown can dominate a game like those two can. He's not a take-the-game-over receiver, but he's excellent. He's top 10. He's around 10, plus or minus 2. And when you're extending, you know, his contract, entering his age 30 year, giving him a top 5 deal is totally worth it because look, that top 5 deal this time next year will be top 9, and in 2 years it'll be top 15. I mean, 15th in yards, 19th in receptions. Come on, people. Have some perspective on this. He's excellent. He's big time. He's got great sort of, contested catch numbers. He's a threat downfield. He's a very good route runner. He's really good after the catch. He's clutch. He's all those things. He's not Chase. He's not Jefferson. He's not A.J. Brown. Then we can start to talk about, it's a matter of preference. There's nothing wrong with saying that Terry McLaurin is somewhere around the 10th, or 8th to 10th best receiver in the game. It's excellent. Think about it. It's an amazing statement when you consider the guy was 19th in receptions and 15th in yards last year. Yes, he was second in touchdowns. He had a great touchdown catch, and some of those were big time. Toothpick, go ahead. You're on.
What's good, Kev? It's been a minute since we talked, but
hope you're well.
My concern level is -20, man, because we got professionals in the building, right? Terry's always showed his professional side when it comes to football as well. So I trust our front office. Had this been, the old regime, I wouldn't trust them to sign a wet paper bag. But I trust him to get this done and not underappreciate his value, but to hit it spot on and maybe give him a little bit of generosity for all the years that he put in that hard work with us. So yeah, -20 for me, Kev.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, a lot of the stuff I was getting on social media, and I read some of those, were, very alarmed. Look, that is the nature of social media. Clearly, it's the nature
Absolutely.
of social media. I just don't see, after the way he played. By the way, I was thinking about this. Remember at the beginning of last year, first couple of games, and then obviously the Cincinnati Monday night game was massive. The catch on 3rd and 7. I'm sorry?
I was going to bring that up to you, too, because he had to get Jaden to trust him. And once he started trusting him, they took off. I was absolutely going to bring that up to you.
Jaden, remember, we were all talking about the first couple of games. Why isn't he throwing to Terry? Why isn't he targeting Terry? Well, what's the deal? He doesn't seem to have a lot of trust in Terry. I'm pulling up the numbers because I want to remember exactly what it was. Terry had 2 catches for 17 yards in the opener, targeted just 4 times against Tampa. And in week 2, he had 6 catches for 22 yards. Remember, he was averaging like 4.4 yards per reception in the first 2 games. And then they hit that bomb early in the game on Monday Night Football against Cincinnati. And then obviously the big one on 3rd and 7 against the all-out zero coverage blitz that Jaden laid right in the bucket in the end zone to clinch that Monday night game. And then after that, I'm looking, look, Terry was, again, he was 19th in receptions. He didn't have a double-digit catch game. He had 2 8-reception games. That was the best. He had 5 100-yard reception games. He was 15th in yards last year, but the trust grew for sure. And then big time, obviously, in the postseason, he had big time catches, had a touchdown in each of the 3 games. That Detroit game was obviously on that quick bubble screen that he broke the tackle and went the distance.
Here's one last
yards.
note. One last quick note, Kev. Wide receiver is the most dependent position in the NFL. Because not only do you have to rely on the quarterback, but you got to rely on other people doing their jobs too. And Terry has no number 2. He has no number 2 to help him roll coverages away from him. So he's doing all of this with a quarterback that he had to get to buy in to trust him, a terrible offensive line, which should be better this year, and no true number 2. You can't say that about Jamar Chase. You can't say that about Justin Jefferson because he has Addison. So if you look at some of the great wide receivers, you got to look at their number 2. That goes all the way back into history. Jerry Rice had John Taylor.
That's fair, and you're right. Jefferson and Chase have much better number 2s. I will concede that. I also watch both of those players and understand the difference between those 2 players and everybody else. Jefferson's one of the great route runners of all time. All time. The separation he gets as a route runner is incredible. And then Chase is like this force. this tour de force. It's almost like a running back as a wide receiver that he just gets the separation. He's got the hands, and then look out. He'll run by you or he'll run over you. And then A.J. Brown's just pure size dominates games with his hands, his route running ability, and his size. Terry's really good, though, and he's in that next tier with several other guys. Look, it's a position, we've talked about this a lot in recent years, and it's a position that has just had unbelievable growth and depth. The depth at the wide receiver position in the league, a lot of it, we just have much better receivers coming out of college. And the LSU connection's been amazing. All right, thanks. Let's go to Ian. Ian, go ahead.
I'm at a 0 as well. Obviously,
I'm glad to hear this because social media is at like a 3 to 5.
Well, again, we talk about this all the time of where don't let a small minority become the loud majority, because I think I just saw your Twitter poll. Most people are not concerned, but I hope in the next CBA they do two things: get rid of the OTA thing, either make it mandatory or not.
Yes,
so we
I agree with that.
had that conversation stopped. And the other thing is this whole pseudo negotiation. In the NBA, the deals are slotted. It just moves quickly. This reminds me of last summer with CD Lamb. Like, these things always happen, and it happens like a day before the season. And I don't understand why these teams do this. Like, if the team holds longer, is the value dropped? Like, we all know it's going to get done. Why not just get it done today? Like, it's almost weird because nobody believes on either side that Terry McLaurin is going to hold out. No one believes that he's not a core commander, all that stuff. So this rigmarole serves nobody. The team doesn't look better, and the player doesn't feel better.
You know what, though? It is conversation. It's content.
For us, sure.
Look, the NFL's at the point where it just doesn't matter. All conversation is good. It just doesn't really matter. But you are right. We go through this with key players every summer. And you said, it doesn't get done until the season begins. That's true sometimes. My guess is with Terry, it'll get done before training camp or very early in training camp, worst case.
Very early, yeah.
Because I think he is an adult. I think that position tends to be sort of dominated by children more than adults. And Terry recognizes his importance, not only on the field, but in the building as a leader, the importance of what they're trying to accomplish here in year two. So I doubt, a year or a couple $1 million is going to stop this from getting done before camp starts. That's my guess.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and again, just to reiterate the point is that when you have this, besides the, say, content creation or whatever for us, or discussion creation, is I don't understand who this serves. The player isn't happy, and the team doesn't gain that much more leverage. Like, just look at the contracts that.
Well, that's not true. Any contract negotiation, deadlines are, utilized as leverage, and you never know how. We don't have the intimate details of this. So, I would guess that Terry's got more leverage in this particular situation because of what they want to accomplish this year. And there's some urgency to make sure that he's happy, he's on the field, and not necessarily playing on a 1-year deal. But, just typical, this stuff, especially when you're talking about one player and an agent with a company versus, say, a company and a company, Ian, it's much more about deadlines typically.
I agree, but let's play this out. So in your opinion, just based on what you know, do you think Adam Peters, Josh Harris have offered a deal to McLaurin that he thinks is too low, or is it vice versa? They haven't offered him a deal at all. Like, what do you think is happening?
I think it's a deal that they either think is too low, or it's not the right number of years, or a combination of both. That's what I think.
agree
I think the report about him being frustrated comes from him, not or his agent, more likely than not. And it's probably, there's validity to it. But at the same time, there's a purpose for putting it out there, and that is to get fans to create a sense of urgency for the team to get this done, because he's a very popular player. And there's this idea that a guy like Terry McLaurin should be taken care of. Move on, Ian. I appreciate it, as always. Let's go to Mark in Springfield. Mark, go ahead.
Good morning, Kevin. No, I'm not at all worried. I'm not at all worried that he's not going to sign. I think he's looking for a range of 120 million to 128 million over a 4-year period. So whether you get that by restructuring his current deal for this year, plus another 3 years, or whether you take his current 28 million and factor that in for the following 3 years. But the one thing that I think is, if I were Terry McLaurin, why would he come in and play under a 1-year contract where he's basically been undervalued for the last 3 years and risk a serious injury that, at the worst could end his career or certainly diminish his value? So my prediction is,
well, that's where the team's got some leverage. He's not going to hold out. That's not going to help his value.
No, it won't. But what's
because he's a football player and he's an adult and he wants to play football. But you think he's going to be much more valuable at 31 years old after having missed an entire season?
I'm not sure, but if he's playing for 1 year and he gets seriously injured, then what good does that do him either? So
I understand that, but we have seen many players go into 1 year left on deals and play it out. And by the way, sometimes hit pay dirt because of it. And so I don't see that happening, but I certainly don't see him holding out. I think the worst case would be somehow they just couldn't get it together and he decided, to hell with you guys, I'm going to go out there, ball out, and I'm going to hit free agency in 26, and I'm going to get, more than what I was asking from you. But I don't think that'll happen.
That could happen, but then again, if he comes in and plays and they still don't pay him, what are they going to do? They're going to designate him as the, a free agent. They're going to designate him.
They could franchise tag him, sure.
A franchise tag him, yeah. So he could take the risk on that. Maybe he thinks that's not worth it either for 1 year.
That's an average of the top 5. Yeah, so that would put him probably where he wants to be right now. You're playing it out. I'm playing it out in our minds. I think the worst possible outcome would be, for whatever reason, and I think it's a long shot, they don't get a deal done and Terry plays his final year, $25.5 million. That's what the last year basically is a cap number anyway. I think go ahead.
Yes, I agree with you. And I still think it's going to get done. And I think it's going to get done somewhere around $120 million for 4 years, no matter how you cut it in years.
Look, Metcalf's deal in aggregate was $132 million, and that's what Albert Breer told Grant and Danny. He thought the overall, value of the deal would be close to DK Metcalf's, which it comes in terms of the guaranteed it comes into the aggregate value. It's a 4-year deal, $33 million a year. So if you get that 4th year on the deal at $120 million, then you're at that $30 million a year. I would bet you Terry's asking for more, but I'm with you. That sounds about right. 4 years, he plays this year at the 25.5, and then you've got 4 years at 30 for your age 31, 32, 33, and 34 seasons. All right. Thanks. Go ahead. Finish up, Mark. Sorry.
He dropped.
All right, he dropped. All right, when we come back, I got a poll up there. I put a poll out, if you want to weigh in, at Kevin Sheehan DC. Concern level about Terry McLaurin's frustration over contract extension talks. Very concerned, kind of concerned, no worries, it'll get done. At this point, 71.9% of you say no worries, it'll get done. And only 5.7% are very concerned. So those of you like Gary, who emailed me, and Rob, who are really concerned and are talking about things like, goodwill evaporating and worst look for the franchise. I sensed that you would be in the minority. I didn't think it would be this much in the minority, but I'm glad that that is the case. That's a good sign about our fan base, is that we're not panicking on June 6th over Terry McLaurin's contract extension. And by the way, these are good conversations to have. Think about it. If there is a lot of interest in this conversation, there's more interest than there's been in years. And the reason is we need them. We really need them, because they've got a chance to do something really special with him in 2025. And years past, it was like, look, he's the only good thing we got. You got to at least keep him. But at the same time, as Doc would say every year, they didn't win with him. So they can, it's not like they won 10 games with him. But they got it done in 22. They'll get it done. I would be shocked if we were sitting here. I'd be shocked if we're sitting here even a month from now and it's not done. But 2 months from now and it's not done, floored. And I think something like, 4 for 120 seems right. Something like that. All right. There's something I haven't gotten to, and I've teased the last couple of days, that I want to mention when we come back. And that is something that Saquon Barkley said about the Eagles' 2024 season when I was out. We'll do that next. We'll talk Aaron Rodgers in the next hour. I think Ben's going to jump on, even though we had him yesterday. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We are also live on our YouTube channel. Like it and subscribe to it. Appreciate it.
All right, the Dallas Stars are parting ways with their head coach, Peter DeBoer, following Peter DeBoer's frustrated comments where he threw $66 million goaltender Jake Oettinger under the bus for their series loss to the Edmonton Oilers. Aaron Rodgers finally signs a one-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers ahead of minicamp, and Tyrese Halliburton hits the game winner to lift the Pacers over the Thunder 111-110. The Pacers did not take the lead until 0.3 of a second it left in the fourth quarter, and that is all she wrote. The Stanley Cup Final continues tonight. The Florida Panthers look to even the series against Edmonton against the Oilers. Puck drop slated for 8 p.m. on TNT, and the Nats, they fall 7-1 to the Chicago Cubs. Jake Irvin gives up 8 hits, 3 earned runs in 5 innings pitched. The Nats will take on the Rangers tonight at 6:45. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
I firmly believe when you look at our team that we had last year, I think we're a top 5 team of all time. And I tell my boys this all the time. Like, if you really look at the season outside of the first 4 games, like, it was belt to ass. How dominant you guys were on defense and how dominant we were on offense and special team. People don't realize how great of a team that actually was.
We were working together.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have training camp, but like, it's kind of different when it's just in game. Like how your coach really is, like how's he calling the game, like getting used to that, kind of getting used to the guys you play with. But after the bye week,
I think we just all bought in.
We just bought in.
I think we all just bought in, and like you hear like the outside noise and expectation. Like we didn't care how it looked. Only thing we cared about was winning football games. And when you have the talent, skill that we have in our team mixed with the coaches, we all play together like how we played. Like teams really stood no chance.
That was Saquon Barkley on a podcast with Reed Blankenship and Cooper DeJean. It was a podcast called Exciting Mics. He said that about a week and a half ago, and obviously I was out last week and didn't have a chance to sort of respond to it. But I saw this, and I'm like, look, Saquon Barkley's a young man. He is probably not a football historian. He probably doesn't remember as much as many of us do. The interesting thing is, if you just go off of the Super Bowl appearance and the Super Bowl performance, man, if that was your only impression of the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles, that's a hell of an impression, because that is one of the most, if not the most dominating defensive performances, I think, in Super Bowl history. Now, the final score and the final numbers don't reflect that, because the score was 40-6, people. Let's not forget that. The score was 40-6 with 7 minutes to go in the game. And the Chiefs got 2, basically long drives at the end of the game against third stringers to put another, and 2 2-point conversions to put 16 points on the game, on the board, and make the final score 40-22. And instead of having, 112 yards of offense, they ended up with like 270. But this was truly one of the all-time defensive beatdowns. Remember, Kansas City did not cross midfield, until midway through the third quarter. They were in their own territory until it was 34-0. The performance by Philly in the Super Bowl, all time, up there with the 85 Bears, but not the opponent. The 85 Bears played Tony Eason in the New England Patriots. The Ravens dominated a bad Kerry Collins New York Giants team in the Super Bowl. I think the Eagles' defensive performance in the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 59, is at the top of the list. I do. I don't think they're the greatest defense of all time, just that one game. Now, this would be the, retort to Saquon Barkley. You cannot be considered a top 5 team of all time when you ended up in your own conference with a record that was tied for second best. You didn't even have the best record in your own conference. Overall in the league, you had the 4th best record in the overall league this season. Heading into the postseason, the Lions were the 1 seed, the Eagles were the 2. I think there were a lot of people that realized that the way Philadelphia was playing at the end of the year, that they were an awfully dangerous team and that they had a chance to certainly get to the Super Bowl. But they weren't the overwhelming favorite. Detroit was. In the NFC, Detroit was the favorite. They were not overwhelming at that point. So you can't possibly be a top 5 all-time team when you weren't even the best team in your conference. And look, along the way in the postseason, it was a crazy snow game against the Rams, but the Rams had the ball deep in Philadelphia territory with a legitimate chance to win that game. On the road in a driving snowstorm in the second round of the postseason. So they were close to being out. It was a great team. What a great roster. Honestly, phenomenal roster Philadelphia has built. But, if you've been around for just 5 minutes, you know that the 85 Bears, the 07 Pats, the 91 Skins, DVOA's number one team of all time, the 72 unbeaten Dolphins, although to be honest with you, I think the 73 Dolphins were slightly better, the 84 Niners, the 89 Niners, the 78 Steelers, hell, the 76 Steelers that did not go to the playoffs, that lost to the Raiders in the AFC Championship, maybe the best defensive team after the 85 Bears of all time. The 99 Greatest Show on Turf Rams. I mean, that's a team that's just was far better than Philadelphia was last year. Man, the Cowboys teams, I know you Cowboys fans out there, you got a bunch of ideas like the 77 Cowboys. They were great. The 92 Cowboys were awesome. But remember, you had the NFC Championship game on the road at Candlestick. You had a road playoff game in round you had a home playoff game before that. You had Philly before that. But that 92 Cowboy team was great. It was a great football team. I think the 77 Cowboys that crushed Denver in Super Bowl 9, Super Bowl 10, that was maybe the best all-around Dallas team. There's a lot of teams that are ahead of Philadelphia. Philadelphia out of the, in the Super Bowl era is going to be a team that comes in. The 2024 Eagles, out of 59 Super Bowl winners, is going to come in the 20s somewhere, probably. They're not on the back half of the Super Bowl teams, but they're nowhere near top 5. All due respect. I mean, the Ravens. The problem with the Ravens of 2000 is they were a wild card team, so they're not. I mean, the defense was dominant. We know that. I don't know. For me, I've always thought of the Bears, the 85 Bears, I think in my lifetime, which is much of the Super Bowl era, minus the first 5 or 6 Super Bowls. I think the 85 Bears are the greatest team that I've ever watched. I think they're the most dominant team that I've ever watched. And, they didn't have a great quarterback in Jim McMahon, but that defense was ridiculous. And look, they had the Giants and the Rams with Dieter Brock at quarterback to get to the Super Bowl, and they faced New England. And that's the knock against Washington, the 91 Skins, is that they played the Falcons with Chris Miller at quarterback. They played the Lions, who were not an outdoor team in the NFC title game, but they did play a Bills team in the Super Bowl. And the thing about that Super Bowl, for those of you who don't know or don't remember, the final score, kind of like the Philadelphia final score against Kansas City in this past Super Bowl, was very misleading. 37-24 was not indicative of the beatdown that Washington put on Buffalo. That game was never a football game. Never. The Philadelphia had a 40-6 lead, and Washington's lead was 31-0, right? In the Super Bowl? 31-0? Before they ended up winning 37-24. I should know that for sure. I think the lead in Super Bowl 26 was 31-0. I am looking that up right now just to make sure that I am right. The box score here. I'm sorry. It was 24-0. It was 17-0 at halftime. It was 24-0. It didn't get to 31-0. It got to 37-10, and then the Bills got 2 touchdowns, just like the Chiefs did, late in the game to make the score look much more respectable than it was. Washington dominated the Buffalo Bills. The Philadelphia Eagles dominated the Kansas City Chiefs. The 91 Skins were a much better overall team and a better season start to finish than the 24 Eagles. I think 91 Skins, 85 Bears, and the 07 Patriots that did not win the Super Bowl. Those are the 3, I think, best teams start of the season until the end of the season that I've ever seen. I know it's probably absolute blasphemy to put a team that didn't win the Super Bowl into the conversation, but the 07 Patriots, if you watched them and you remember what they looked like during the regular season, I mean, that was a scary offensive team. All right, Ben Standig next. What were you just saying about the Legion of Boom Seahawks?
I said that they're probably one of my because I was thinking about this, too, and they're probably one of the best for my money in my lifetime. That's probably what because I asked Ben, I was curious, because just want to know, but yeah, Legion of Boom's up there for me.
Dominant team.
Yeah,
dominant team, and by the way, a dominant Super Bowl win.
My God, that was the first time we hosted. First time we hosted a Super Bowl at my house, and yeah, the game was over by halftime. We were all just like, game's on.
Yeah. It was like a safety on the first drop back
yeah.
for Peyton Manning. Yeah. No, the Legion of Boom Seahawks were awesome. And that was a better team than the 2024 Eagles. I would put them in that. So I said, I think the Eagles are somewhere, out of 59 Super Bowl winning teams, they're probably in the 20s somewhere.
Sure.
They're not top 5. All due respect to Saquon Barkley. All right, we got Ben Standig with us. Ben jumped on with us yesterday to talk Terry McLaurin, updating the poll. It hasn't changed much. Concern level about Terry's frustration over a contract extension, 73.7% of you are in right mind. No worries, it'll get done. That, to me, is a really sound, reasonable answer. kind of concerned, 20.1%, very concerned, 6.1%. Ben, I think you are in the no worries, it'll get done category, correct?
Yeah, correct. Again, if for no other reason, we just went through this with the same player 3 years ago. Different regime, but, same player. And after missing some of the voluntary work and the mandatory minicamp, he signed a deal the next month. And I don't have any real reason to deviate from thinking that that's how it's going to play out to some degree this time.
Have you thought about what that deal will look like? Have you done any work on that? We were talking about that with callers.
I haven't nerded out to the point of the very specifics, but just in terms of the average annual salary, $30 million's been where I've been projecting, a little more than what T. Higgins got, a little bit less than DK Metcalf. Maybe it's closer to Metcalf. And the only reason I'm saying a little bit less there is just that DK, is a little bit younger. Nothing crazy, but just a little bit. So, so something like that. I kind of feel like everybody above Metcalf is sort of at another tier to some degree. We can argue whether Terry McLaurin or CeeDee Lamb is the better receiver right now, but Lamb's 5 years younger or something like that. So there's that. So annual average around 30 would be my best guess, and probably for 3 years, something like that.
Talking to, of course, Ben Standig from The Athletic, at Ben Standig on X on Twitter, and Ben's got a podcast called Last Man Standing. Yeah, I think we, look, it's a story because it's June 6th and there's no draft and there's no free agency and there are no games. But I personally think we can move on from this unless we get some real report that says Terry wants to be traded. If we get that report, we can circle back to it. So 2 players that I wanted to talk about, because we heard a lot from Joe Witt Jr. in particular about these 2 players. What do you think they were saying, Joe Witt and even Dan Quinn? What were they trying to tell us about Daron Payne?
Well, I think they're trying to encourage him with what they've been seeing so far, and that's a guy who Daron said he was challenged at the end of the year by defensive line coach Darryl Tapp to be not just a leader by example, but a vocal leader as well. That's come across. Again, relatively speaking, Daron Payne is a man of few words, so it's not like he's giving speeches, but just helping to point things out. But that also coincides with being a little more aggressive, or maybe a lot more aggressive when it comes to what he's been showing in practice, to the point that they've had to tell him calm down a bit, save it for Sunday kind of deal, or training camp. But they're definitely all the way they're talking about him. It's not like Daron Payne's been bad the last couple of years. He just has not lived up to that contract. And I think we've talked about this. Based on where this defense looks right now and what they have up front, barring, some sort of major move, the guy who has the chance to be a Pro Bowl player at that spot is Daron Payne. And we've seen it before. And, I sometimes it's not what they say. Sometimes it's what they don't say. And, you can tell last year, it's not like they rarely came out and ever said, boy, Daron Payne really was crushing it in this game. They would bring up some other random players, but never him. And then the fact that I asked with this open-ended question, who's somebody that's been standing out, and he goes to Daron Payne. I buy it, but also, I think it's a sign that, hey, look, we want to, stoke this fire, because, last year he was good, but, again, they need more, especially the way this team is configured. So sounds like he's off to a pretty good start with his play, his effort, his attitude, and they definitely want to hope that this continues.
Yeah, part of me was thinking in listening to them talk about Daron Payne that, there are a range of possibilities here. One, they really are blown away impressed. 2, after being with all of these players for a year now, they've learned more about how to manage them, how to motivate them, and maybe being public about how good he looks and his potential and the whole thing. I remember when Jack Del Rio got here with Ron Rivera, it was very early in that first off season. And Del Rio said, 94, that's the most impressive player out there. And look, we've seen him at his best. At his best, it is really good. I mean, it is dominant. We just don't get that, consistently, and we understand that to be the issue. But I was thinking, I wonder whether or not this is more of, we figured kind of how to deal with Duran and to get him motivated and to manage him, or they legitimately were blown away. What about Quan Martin? I thought there were interesting things said by Joe Witt Jr. about Quan Martin.
Yeah, we already had heard about that he essentially played a chunk of last year with injuries to both shoulders, leading to needing surgery on both, which is, something we didn't know about. We can discuss whether that should have been on the injury report or not. But in terms of, I thought Quan Martin had a pretty good year. He is the rare pick from the Rivera era that has not only stuck around, but made some kind of an impact. But then Joe Witt revealed that last year during the off-season program that he actually benched Quan Martin, put him on the second team, and he said specifically because he was making too many mistakes that we just can't afford, when the games turn real. And then the next three practices with the second unit, he was, for Joe Witt's perspective, kind of on fire and really crushing it in practice. And then that just continued to the point that now going into this year, Joe Witt saying he thinks Quan Martin can be one of the top safeties in the league. It feels like Quan Martin's been around forever. He is only going into his third year. And look, I mean, it's the secondary has some nice pieces, obviously. And we know Marshawn Lattimore in his past has been a Pro Bowl player, but right now it's, if you said who's going to be the next defensive back to get to sort of that level, Quan Martin or Sandersfield might be the two guesses, and or maybe Trey Amos once we see him out there. But yeah, Quan Martin, if that's an honest assessment of his ability, that would obviously be huge, and it will be fun to see a guy who apparently is going to be able to play going into this year, feeling a lot better, both in terms of the understanding the system, what the coaches want, and also physically.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to read about how, he had been benched. I don't specifically remember that. That was surprising to me. Maybe it wasn't to you. I thought what he said about Kane Medrano, the 6th round pick out of UCLA, was interesting too, because when he got drafted and I ended up watching those highlights, I'm like, he looks more like a safety than a linebacker, and that's what they're trying to figure out, right?
Yeah, to tying this in with the Quan Martin part, they move guys around so often, and we see different combinations. It takes a while before you realize kind of like who's with what group. So a starter working with the backups or somewhere or a different position isn't always out of whack. And that's sort of the same thing here in terms of like the position. Yeah, what is he? If you read his profiles, he's got to work on his tackling. Get more consistent there, but the speed element is impressive. And this is a guy that played receiver, switched over. He's got he was again the fastest linebacker, running the 40 at the combine. So there's a lot to like there about his athletic traits and his instincts. But now it's just a matter of how do we maximize this player? I think he's going to be one of those guys where, ultimately 2026, it'll be more of an interesting moment in time for him. Jordan McGee is the third linebacker after his injury-plagued rookie season. There won't be really much time there. On the safety sort of hybrid front, maybe, but you still have Quan Martin, Will Harris, Percy Butler. Joe Witt became like the 18th different coach to say he's got to get Jeremy Reeves on the field more defensively.
Right.
So he, and there's also like Dominic Hampton, who was kind of a similar type profile as Medrano, who was on the team last year and didn't really play. So, again, I think he's really interesting and all that. But, 2026 is probably where he's going to have a potential bigger impact, or where we'll get a better feel for where he's at.
You mentioned Jordan McGee. We know that they really liked him, and they thought, we all thought he would be on the field last year, but he got injured. What did Joe Witt Jr. say this week about Jordan McGee's role next year?
Yeah, obviously, I think they're all bummed about, just the injury starting in the summer, and they just, kind of just derailed the plan there. It kind of reminds me to a certain degree of Cole Turner in his rookie year. Like, he really was impressive during the summer, but then got hurt, and then it just never kind of took off. Of course, in Cole Turner's case, it's never really, unfortunately, taken off after what was a promising start. In this case, I think there's still a lot of optimism around Jordan McGee's ability. Witt said that, they had legit packages in the plan for McGee last year to get him on the field. But, again, ultimately, he just the injury just kind of, sidelined him or saddled him all year. There's an opening, of course, once you get past Luvu and Bobby Wagner to be that sort of third linebacker. Michael Walker last year took on some of that responsibility, and he left in free agency. And, I don't imagine they're going to do anything with Frankie Luvu that'll be different than we saw. But as we've all discussed, it's not like the defensive end room at the moment stands out. So, maybe Luvu ends up playing even a little bit more on the line, and that could open up a way to get McGee on the field. And then I think the ultimate question is with Bobby Wagner, obviously, incredible instincts, leadership, all those good things. But, the speed declines over time for players, and you could see a little bit of that last year. Does that lead to them saying, finding ways to get McGee on the field, or maybe get Wagner off the field on third downs more than we saw last year? I think that could be an interesting scenario. But yeah, I think Jordan McGee, it's so funny, McGee and Sinnott and McCaffrey and Johnny Newton, we have, it's almost like all these guys are quasi rookies to a degree. They played to an extent, in some cases, had some good moments, but by and large, there's still a lot more questions. Not like questions, can they play, but questions like, how do they, what's their role going to be this year? And I think even though this is a small draft class, the current one, it feels like it's larger because those guys are, there's still a lot of questions about how they ultimately fit in.
You got a chance to talk to some of the assistant coaches yesterday. Anything stand out?
Yeah, they make the assistants available once or twice a year, and just gotta just make a run at whoever you want to talk to. I talked to mostly some of the offensive coaches. I did talk to Anthony Lynn, running back coach, former NFL head coach for a little bit, and we talked about his room. He said he thinks Brian Robinson is arriving in pretty good mental shape, and we talked a lot about he thinks Brian Robinson's positioned for a good year. I did bring up, hey, the production kind of faded down the stretch, and he didn't put the onus on Robinson per se. There were the offensive line could be a little bit better, and obviously they did make some of those moves, and not having Austin Eckler I think probably hurt overall. But, he said, and we've heard this before from other coaches, that Robinson can be an effective pass catcher. Kind of just, we got to figure out ways to get him more involved there. And, again, I'm not saying it's false, but, it's similar to like a coach saying we got to get Jeremy Reeves on the field, kind of wake me up when it happens a little bit, But the other part I thought that was interesting is, they bring back the three guys from last year, plus Chris Rodriguez, if you want to count him as the fourth, and then they draft Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt or Bill. And Lynn said that he basically just puts the running backs into two different categories, running back A, running back B. Running back B is more of that change of pace, pass catcher type, and running back A is, more of your traditional lead back. And even though Krosky Merritt, from a one-cut burst kind of way, looks like that B category, Lynn said that he was bigger than he thought, and he puts him into that A category with Brian Robinson. And it's not the same thing as saying there is a competition for that, but it is to say that's how they're viewing him. And I have been wondering
Are they going to make any type of movement there? Do they want to have, running backs on the field who will present more of a dual threat option than the way Robinson has the last couple of years? So I just thought it was a good clarification that they're viewing Bill Krosky-Merritt as a more of that lead backy type. Again, that doesn't mean he's going to play. He's going to get 20 carries. I just mean stylistically, and that's interesting. He also said that he thought Michael Wiley, who was an undrafted free agent last year, that had some interesting, fun moments over the course of the summer. Then was on practice squad. He said he thought he may be having as good of a camp as anybody. Again, we've heard these things before. He said Casimir Allen looks much more like a running back now, having converted. Again, we've heard about his potential for the last few years.
Kaz Allen?
Yeah.
As a back.
Still on the team. Yeah, they've shifted him last year into sort of that role, but again, there's always something. Depth chart, injury, it just hasn't happened. So, again, for me, it's going to be a wait. I've done that game too many times. We'll see where he's at. He's obviously got impressive speed, and that's why all these coaches are fascinated. But we'll see. So whether it's the running back room, the tight end room, or others, everybody is talking about the crazy depth they have there, and it's going to be real competitions. And that's exactly what you'd expect from these coaches. So we'll have to wait and see. But look, I thought Wiley was interesting last year to the point that I think I was even making some of the argument that he could be the third back, because they need some more of that explosive opportunity. They went with McNichols, obviously, as a more veteran, solid piece, and he's really good. But, if they're still searching for that, more big play potential out of the backfield, then, Krosky-Merritt is intriguing in that way. And I guess hypothetically, if Wiley or Kaz Allen has made a big move, we'll see. But, so I think that's, everybody's optimistic right now, Kevin. I don't know if you've figured that might be the case.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with this time of year, so I didn't know how it went. Although everybody's optimistic to a point. There were many years where we weren't optimistic, but we were trying to force ourselves into some delusional space. All right, we are talking, of course, to Ben Standig. I switched subjects to something I haven't talked about today, and I'll do it with you. Aaron Rodgers, not a surprise, signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers. How do you think this will work out?
Well, probably not to the degree that, Steelers Nation is hoping. Like, I don't think, I think because of all the negative angles going on with the Jets last year, Aaron Rodgers' performance is probably a little bit overlooked. He actually, wasn't that bad. He's not the MVP level guy anymore. I know I've heard you talk about that. He looks like a guy doesn't want to get hit anymore. So, that can affect what he's doing, but it's an upgrade over what they had and all that. I just, to me, the most fascinating thing I find is, I know you can tell me all you want about Mike Tomlin and the, he hasn't had a losing record in his career. The team hasn't had one losing season. And, every year they're right in the mix to make the playoffs. They made it last year and so on. But the fact that 2 years in a row now they've had to sort of be, get desperate and take Russell Wilson and now wait this out for Aaron Rodgers, it really just goes to show that organization feels like it's in kind of a messy spot. Like, they need to figure something out, because at best Rodgers is a 1-year fix. So that to me is what's interesting. Why are they continually finding themselves in this position? They either have to get better, or they maybe have to decide, hey, we're going to, kind of not purposely, but, quasi tank a little bit to get ourselves in a position to get a quarterback. But, look, they got DK Metcalf. That's going to help. They made some good moves on the offensive line over the last couple of years. They bolstered the defensive line with their first round pick, Derek Harmon. So, the Steelers are always solid. And if Rodgers can be good, then, we'll see. They're obviously in a tough division, but I don't know. It's just hard for me to envision a world where Pittsburgh becomes a real top-notch contender with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think I think a little bit differently about this. I for whatever reason, I watched a lot of those games. I guess more times than not, I had action on them. I just didn't think Aaron Rodgers was anywhere near even the top 5 reasons the Jets ended up having the season they had. Greg Zuerlein literally, this is not an exaggeration, cost them 3 games with missed field goals and missed PATs in games that they should have won. That would have gotten them to 8 wins had they had a kicker last year. Their defense was dreadful last year. They had a totally dysfunctional coaching situation, and they tried to play Teron Smith at left tackle, and that was a disaster before they changed that out. I actually, and I said this throughout the year last year, and people thought I was nuts. I thought when he threw the football, he looked like Aaron Rodgers. And yes, there were, he was not, especially coming off the Achilles, you could tell that there was a little bit of hesitancy to get hit or to take off and run. But in terms of slinging it, especially when you got late in the season, and, some of the opponents they played weren't great. Like he had a pretty good game, I remember, against Jacksonville late in the season, against the Dolphins, in a meaningless game at the end where he threw 4 touchdown passes. But there was a game at Miami in late November, early December where he threw for 350 and was unbelievable in an overtime loss. I think this could work. He's in a better organization, much better organization. They've got a much better defense, at least on paper. We know how defense goes. He's got a big target in Metcalf. He's got a big target in Freiermuth. They drafted Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. I think that's going to be a big key. Jalen Warren and Caleb Johnson, can they run the football? I think that it's not going to surprise me if he is, in that 12 to 16 range of starting quarterbacks next year. And if that's the case, that's the best position Pittsburgh's been in at quarterback since Roethlisberger was healthy and upright. And I think it could be the difference between just a 9-8 and 10-7 and out in one round team versus a team that maybe wins 11 and wins a playoff game. He's not, an elite quarterback, but God, man, Zerline cost him the early portion of the season. They had a chance to start something like 4-1, 5-3, and he literally missed 3 kicks that cost him games. And their defense was terrible. I'm really fascinated to watch this, in part, Ben, because I was on the Aaron Rodgers is not the problem bandwagon. Now he's 41, and maybe he falls off the cliff literally this year and can't do anything right. But I think it's an interesting story. I heard a bunch of people talking on the Greenberg show, Get Up, Ryan Clark in particular, who, tough watch these days, tough follow on social media in particular. How about that thing with RG3 last week or 2 weeks ago? Oh, my God, both of them. But, they're like, well, it didn't work out in New York. Did they forget that he tore his Achilles on the 4th snap of the first season that he was there? The first year didn't work out. You know why? Because he didn't play. He got injured. Yeah, you're taking a risk with a 39-year-old quarterback that he's going to get hurt. I understand that, but it wasn't because he was terrible. It was because he wasn't on the field. And then last year, there's no doubt early in the season, it wasn't the Aaron Rodgers, but there were games in which it looked pretty close to the Aaron Rodgers, especially when Devontae Adams showed up. But I don't know. We'll see. I think it's another interesting story. 41 years old is not something we typically see in the NFL. Teams contending. We saw it with Brady, and that's it.
Obviously it's an intriguing story from a certain, obviously he's one of the greats of all time. I've always said I think Rodgers is the best quarterback at their peak, especially throwing the ball of anyone I've ever seen. Maybe not for the career, but peak is incredible. But it's not just to me that he's 41 and all that. The drama follows him around. I mean, and that's what's interesting here is, the Jets were already a mess, and then his part of it is help fuel the dysfunction. The Steelers are the least dysfunctional organization typically in the league, and Mike Tomlin, this is why it's been so impressive that he doesn't have any losing records, because even when they're, have, seemingly down years with talent, he finds ways to get them to be highly competitive. So how does this Aaron Rodgers drama mesh with the Mike Tomlin discipline? That is the most interesting aspect of this. If that works out, if Aaron Rodgers, buys in, so to speak, then I think the ceiling is a lot higher. But, is this the point where Mike Tomlin, I don't want to say meets his match, but right. Everybody eventually bends to Aaron Rodgers. The fact that Aaron Rodgers is coming in for mandatory minicamp, we'll see what he actually does. But, the fact he's coming in to get around the team, okay, you wish you'd done it 3 months ago, but okay, he's doing it now before training camp. That's at least something. At least to me says some kind of nod. Because last year he skipped mandatory minicamp, even though he'd already been with the Jets a little bit to go traveling. And I was like, really? Okay. And I remember pointing out, and all the Jets fans are getting into the, calm down. Okay. So, so I think to me that's what's most interesting. The Tomlin discipline combining with the Rodgers drama, kind of who wins there. And that's going to go a long way towards, I think, Pittsburgh, winning or losing even more than just the fact that he's, an older quarterback. Like you said, he can play. It's just there's always a lot else going on with that.
All right. I know you watched last night. I spent the first hour and we took calls on OKC Indiana game 1. What did you think?
Well, obviously an amazing game, particularly the second half was like good. Indiana was obviously way off in the first half with all the turnovers, but they kept coming back, in the second half, and then OKC would make a shot or two, and then you thought, okay, maybe this is, maybe they're not going to be able to come back, and then they just keep picking away, and they get it done despite losing the turnover margin by 18, despite not having so many fewer possessions because of the turnovers. But they just and nobody had like a really strong game. They just had a lot of guys who played well. Then of course Halliburton, oh my God. I mean, we're gonna have to stop using Sam Cassell as the example of a guy with with a little bit extra down there. Halliburton, it's just unbelievable. I mean, I assume you saw the stat. I think it was on with your guy Scott last night, but it was like, in the league over the last, I don't know how many years, 30 years, whatever it is, the most game-winning shots in the final 5 seconds. Like LeBron has the most, but he's played an insane amount of games. And then I think it's Reggie Miller who's played a ton of games. And then Miller is tied with now Halliburton, who's played 35 playoff games, and most of them have come to this year. It's just remarkable. I just think for the series, look, OKC, I get it. Incredible team, incredible season they've had. They have an awesome depth. Their defense is off the charts. They have the MVP. But when I kept looking at Indiana, I'm just like, boy, Indiana is probably the first team they've played in the playoffs that has real depth. Indiana will be the team that is not going to be afraid to run. They may even push the pace even more. Defensively, sure. It's hard to know if anybody in league history has been as good as the perimeter guys that OKC had. But it's not like Indiana's guys are poor there. I mean, Nembhard was good against Brunson, and he had some really good moments last night. SGA had to take a lot of shots to get his points, and nobody else really stepped up. So I picked Indiana in 6. I just thought people were sleeping on them, and it was more like a smell test kind of thing for me.
Yeah, I know. You told me that the other day when we talked. Yeah. I disagreed. I was looking for every part of my contrarian being to step to the table, to the window on Indiana, but I just didn't see it. I picked OKC in 5. I bet them last night laying 9, and I still think they'll win the series. But to your point, Indiana always had a much better chance than the Knicks against OKC. And I said, Ben, about this game last night, it was one of the strangest games, also one of the more thrilling games of the postseason. But there was never a moment in this game until the final minute where I thought that Oklahoma City would lose. In fact, there wasn't really a moment until the final 4 or 5 minutes that I thought they wouldn't cover. I thought it was the most dominating defensive play in a half of an NBA playoff game that I've seen I can't remember something that matched not just 19 turnovers, 11 of those turnovers were steals. It wasn't that Indiana was careless with the basketball. They were having the ball taken from them. in a way in which it doesn't even account for how many times deflections, drove the shot clock down to, 1 or 2 seconds, and they were forced to take a hurried, rough shot. And I still can't believe that OKC lost that game. And I've watched like you have throughout. I know what Indiana's done. I know what Halliburton's done. I just didn't think they could do it against that team last night.
Yeah, and I would say that, we don't often talk about coaching the way we do in, say, the NFL.
Right.
And Rick Carlisle is clearly one of the better coaches of, this century, debate all the time. But, he's always been a great coach. He gets, more out of his players. And he's one of those coaches in the sort of the Joe Gibbs mold. He doesn't have we must do this. He looks at the roster, figures out what he has,
right,
and goes from there. And that's why they've been so up-tempo. On the flip side, Mark Daigneault, right? He was coach of the year this year. Oh no,
yeah.
no, sorry, Atkinson was.
Atkinson Cleveland was right. Sorry,
right. But he was obviously way up there, because of the great season. I was not that impressed by him tactically in the Denver series. I mean, Denver has Jokic, but that series should not have been this close, considering Denver had minimal depth to begin with. Then they got injuries, and yet it went 7 games. And look, there may be logical reasons, but not playing Chet Holmgren only 23 minutes and playing their centers a combined 40 minutes when that was viewed as, hey, get Miles Turner in foul trouble, and then what does Indiana do? They didn't go down that route.
When Indiana went small, it was tough, but just, I didn't think about this until after the game, but starting Cason Wallace instead of Hartenstein was like an admission up front. This is a different team than we're dealing with. And I think Minnesota was a good team. In Denver, you say it shouldn't have gone to 7. Look, Denver should have never lost game 4 at home. They should have had a 3-1 series lead. And certainly Denver had a chance to win game 5 on the road. It's tough against Indiana when they have Siakam at the 5 to have both big guys on the floor.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Siakam piece to me is another reason why I think Indiana was being overlooked. Like he's really good. He can play big. He can run the court. He scored 30 or more points 3 times in the last series. And OKC don't exactly have a guy to fit that. But by the way, like even the Cason Wallace piece, a friend of mine brought this up. When's the time that a team that was a heavy favorite made a starting lineup change for no obvious reason before game 1?
That's what I'm saying. I didn't think about it as much in the beginning, and it wasn't a big deal really on the broadcast. And I thought, man, after they lost the game, they've switched lineups during the postseason at times. I think once or twice they've done it. But it's like, wait a minute, why are you the heavy favorite concerned about your starting lineup that has basically destroyed everybody with the exception of Denver?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, it's one thing to, make adjustments. That's the fun part out of 7-game series, the game-to-game adjustments, but they usually start game 2 or the underdog is the one that does something. And not that Indiana would view itself as an underdog, but why would OKC at home, why would you switch anything up? Just play it out, do what you do, and then go from there. And, again, they didn't play any of the bigs late, and at least in the case of Chet Holmgren. Like, sure, a 7-footer having to switch out against smaller players is not going to be easy, but he's shown plenty of ability to be mobile. He's been a great rim protector, can shoot. Like, it's not like, shoot from the perimeter. It's not like he's like some, Rory Hibbert, stiff who can't move.
No, he's got to score more than 6 points and play more than 24 minutes. I got to roll. I do want to leave you with this, though, because I agree with you on Rick Carlisle, and I was just curious as to what his overall record was. Like, we all consider Rick Carlisle to be a great coach. His overall record as a head coach is 993 and 860 in the regular season. That's a barely better than 500 overall record. And his postseason record, 71 and 79, sub 500. The NBA is crazy. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Always, man. See ya.
Ben Standig, everybody. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. If you've got older windows, consider buying new windows. You're losing money on your heating and air conditioning bills, that is, he said, with, windows that aren't well insulated. New windows, especially if your windows are, say, 10 years of age or older, are going to save you big money. And Window Nation's right now offering big-time savings opportunities beyond your utilities with their semi-annual sale. What is that? 4 free windows with every 4 purchased. You get a free entry door when you purchase a house full of windows with no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest charged for 2 full years. So in addition to saving big on utility bills with a hot summer headed our way and a cold winter, they're saying, for 2025, they don't really know at this point, but they are saying that. You're going to save big on your heating bills when we get to wintertime. And all the while, you're not paying anything until the year 2027. Add to that, their windows come with a lifetime warranty. So you've got no risk. You'll save big time into the future. It takes a call or a trip to windownation.com. Call them at 866-90-NATION. Mention my name. They'll come out. They'll give you a free in-home estimate. They're not going to pressure you. You won't be obligated to do anything. You can shop the deal if you want. You'll actually find out with the estimate which of your windows really need to be replaced. Most people don't know that. Mention my name. I promise you they'll schedule a convenient in-home estimate. They'll be in and out of your home in an hour or less. And when they come to install your windows, it'll happen in a day or less, and your home will be cleaner than when they got there. 4 free windows with every 4 purchased, a free entry door with a house full of windows purchased with no payments at all until the year 2027. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. So the Nats got beat by Chicago last night, 7-1. Texas is in town, and guess who's pitching tonight against the Washington Nationals? Our old friend, Patrick Corbin, who's been pitching well for the Rangers. His ERA right now at 3.71 is easily the best it has been since the World Series year of 2019. He currently has had a solid outing in all 6 of his starts. I'm sorry, in all but really 1 of his 10 starts, in his last 6 this month or in May, he basically took his team into the 6th, 7th, or 8th innings in every single game with a chance to win by giving up no more than 3 earned runs. He's been outstanding for Texas. I don't think anybody saw that coming at 35 years old with the way he had pitched here, but he is in town tonight as the starter in Washington against his old team, the Nats. Soroka on the bump for the Nats, who have played well recently, but did not generate any offense. Really, it's been now, about 4 games where their offense and their bats have gone silent to a certain degree after that stretch against the Mariners and the Diamondbacks where they were absolutely crushing the ball. Not enough last night and barely enough in the Mackenzie Gore outing in the penultimate game against the Cubs. But yeah, last night, just 8 total hits. James Wood, 0 for 4. Wood now in his last 4 games is just 1 for 12. So he is in a bit of a slump right now. All right, we'll finish up with some football when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app.
All right, the Dallas Stars are parting way with head coach Peter DeBoer following his comments after the Western Conference Final, where he threw $66 million goaltender Jake Oettinger under the bus for their series loss to Edmonton. The Aaron Rodgers story finally gets some resolvement. He signs a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers right before minicamp, and Tyrese Halliburton hits the game winner to lift the Pacers over the Thunder 111-110. The Pacers didn't take the lead until 0.3 of a second to go in the 4th quarter, and that's all she wrote. Pacers take a 1-game lead. The Stanley Cup Final continues tonight. The Florida Panthers look to even the series against Edmonton in Edmonton against the Oilers. Puck drop slated for 8 p.m. on TNT. And the Nats, they fall 7-1 to the Chicago Cubs. Jake Irvin gives up 8 hits, 3 earned runs in 5 innings pitched. The Nats will take on the Rangers tonight at 6:45. As you just heard, former Nats starting pitcher Patrick Corbin will be on the bump for the Rangers, and Michael Soroka will take the hill for the Nats. Nats on deck with Charlie and Dave at 6:15 on 106.7 The Fan. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
Comes down to one last play, and it's going to be getting longer by the second. You're all the way back at the 30-yard line. Now you can step into it. Here comes the Hail Mary with the game on the line, and the ball is caught! Caught! It's a miracle! It's Noah Brown! Oh, my goodness! This town is going crazy. It's a madhouse in Landover, Maryland. He did it. Oh, this one will be.
You know, Noah Brown's Hail Mary catch to beat the Bears was certainly one of the highlights of the season, no doubt. And then, you know, when we got to early December and they crushed Tennessee, he had a serious internal kidney injury that was actually acutely dangerous for a period of time. He is fully recovered, thank God. He is back with this football team. And apparently, according to a few people that I've talked to, they've got high hopes for Noah Brown in 2024. You know, they did draft a wide receiver in Jalen Lane in the 4th round. They had him as their number 1 punt returner on their board. And Jalen Lane could end up working his way into a lot of the offense as well, in addition to being a returner. They went out and signed Deebo Samuel. That's a weapon, not necessarily the spot Noah Brown will play, but De'Ami Brown is gone. Zacchaeus gone. Jamison Crowder gone. Right now, Terry McLaurin's going to line up with probably Deebo Samuel, and then who else? I'm going to tell you it's going to be Noah Brown on opening day against the Giants, because Jaden loved Noah Brown. Before he got hurt, Noah Brown had 35 catches for 453 yards and had some big-time looks on third down. Remember, there was a period of time where, why isn't he throwing to Terry as much as he's throwing to number 85? And I think the size, the comfort level with his route running, and Noah Brown, remember, drew a lot of PIs last year. He was near the top of the league when he got hurt in drawing defensive pass interference penalties. But this is a guy that they clearly feel comfortable with, Kingsbury feels comfortable with, and Jaden Daniels feels comfortable with. And you're just so happy that, it all worked out, because it was a scary, serious injury against the Tennessee Titans, and they were without him the rest of the year. But he is back, healthy, and apparently looking big-time sharp. What does it mean this time of year? Not much, but the fact that he's a returning player who performed and produced with a young quarterback who really became sort of attached to him, and in the same way that he became attached to Ertz and Terry, obviously. But Noah Brown, I think sometimes when we think about this team next year, it's like, okay, Terry, Deebo, and then is going to be Noah Brown, I think, by the time we get to the opener. But I think there are high hopes for McCaffrey in year 2, high hopes for Jalen Lane down the road beyond just a returner. And remember, they still have 2 veteran guys in Gallup and KJ Osborne on the team. But Noah Brown, don't forget about him. Not that you have. The word is they're really confident that he once again is going to be a big part of what they're doing offensively, and a big target for Jaden Daniels. Remember, they didn't trade for him. He got cut by Houston, right before the season, the final cut down date, and they went and signed him. It was like late August. It was probably like August 31st, somewhere around there, where they picked up Noah Brown off waivers, and he ended up having a highly productive season. I was actually surprised. I remember I was surprised that he had been released. They did draft a receiver, and they signed a receiver. That was what we thought might happen. But they certainly didn't draft an edge pass rusher, did they? Oh, that was a month and a half ago. Unbelievable NBA Game 1. I can't wait for Game 2 Sunday night in Oklahoma City. NHL Stanley Cup continues tonight with Edmonton having a 1-0 lead. That game is also in Edmonton. And the Aaron Rodgers saga is over. I think the Terry McLaurin saga will certainly end long before the regular season does. All right. Thanks to Ben. Thanks to all of you who called on the show today. Thanks to Max. Enjoy the weekend. Back on Monday.